So how many people use Infraworks right now?
Raise your hand.
Yeah, just click your little hand raise button.
I use it.
All right. So nobody. Tip fish.
I don't know enough about it. That's why.
Right.
If I knew how to start it, I tried it, and all I got was confused.
Hey Adam, it's Rob. I use it on a regular basis. So.
All right, great. What do you use it for mostly, Rob?
We use it a lot when we kick off a project for conceptual design up front. You know, just to kind of get a rough pad grading, access road, and then we also use it at the end of the project for visualization, presentation purposes. So.
It looks like there's also a plugin for HEC-RAS or something, because they haven't come out with the Senate or the Storm, basically the HEC-RAS module for AutoCAD yet. I'm wondering if they're pushing it towards Infraworks.
They do have a. It's not really a plugin that's Autodesk's creating. There's an add-in that is being developed by a third party that does 2D analysis over the watershed, kind of like HEC-RAS's 2D stuff, but
right.
Most people don't approve 2D for submittals yet, at least down here. So I don't know if it'll do us any good. Plus, it's an additional cost. Don't do enough of it to really warrant that yet. So I'm gonna share. Let's do the whole screen. So I do a little bit like Rob does, in that I use Infraworks for visualizing our stuff. I do a little bit of upfront stuff. It works great for processing GIS. It's a great way to find some basic information for your site if you don't have anything available. Recently, I started using it to process digital terrain models so that I wouldn't have to do that in a GIS package and bring it into Civil 3D. I just do it in Infraworks and then bring that model directly in. So this is Infraworks, the new startup panel, and I guess in the 2021 release. They did away with the numbering system in this, so it's really hard to tell what version we're in. We're just in Infraworks. It just says Infraworks up here. But given the new interface, I'm assuming it's the 21 release. So if you're starting from scratch with a project, you could either go search for all your GIS data yourself, or you can use the model builder. Model builder pulls some high-level GIS data using USGIS contour data, some building stuff, some road work. So if you were to click the model builder button up here, it gives you your map. You can basically zoom in wherever you want, find your location. If you happen to have a shapefile of your site already, you could actually import that using one of this button here, select the polygon. Where am I?
Adam, is that USGS data just automatically loaded with Infraworks?
It's not loaded, it's just available. So they'll go and scrape it in the cloud behind the scenes for you, and then build the model, and then they'll send you a link where you end up downloading it.
It's more like open source data.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bet after USGS puts out their 3-depth which is going to be their high level quality LiDAR based data, then we would actually have more valid models than what we have available now.
I hope so. That
Yeah.
would be great if we can. I don't know if they'll scrape that data once it's available. I don't know behind the scenes where exactly they're getting this. They just say it's USGS.
Yeah, but from what I know, last time, like, if I remember well, it's just anything that's, open to the public published, it's not ever going to give you like a paid product, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anything from USGS will always be open for the public. Like the 3DEP is going to be open for the public for sure.
So, yeah.
On national map. Now, whether or not they're taking it from national map directly from USGS. So that's maybe something important that I would look into.
Yeah. So if you're using the model builder, like I said, in this case, I use the shapefile just to bring me to my site. There's a stream through here, so I'm kind of wanting to know where it goes. I'm going to look and maybe get a bigger area than what I want. So I typically just zoom to what I want and click this button that just says use the extent of this map for your model. You do have some limitations, 200 square kilometers. This is 12, so we're well within that. And then you need to give it a name. It needs to be unique. Say, so since we're on County Road 246, we'll just say that. Once you click create model, it's gonna just prompt you with this thing saying we're creating your model. It'll be ready for you in a few minutes. You'll get an email when it's ready, and then you can just click out of that and continue on. You can go on to another model, create more models, do some other work. Once it's ready, and if you have Infraworks open, it'll actually just populate on here at the same time you get the email. But I actually pulled this one earlier, and it's this project here. So it'll take me a minute to open because it was pretty large. Right. So one of the other things it pulls is a good aerial. It may not be the best quality, but if you're working out in the middle of BFE in the county, it's probably better than what you'd be able to get from anything local there. First thing I usually do is pull up the data sources just to make sure we have what we want to show in here. In this case, I usually add in a few things, like I added in property so that I know exactly where that is. If you have, again, the shapefile for it, all you need to do is drag and drop it into the window, and it'll automatically pop up with this dialog box to configure it. So when you first bring it in, this type will be blank and it'll need to be filled in. You can populate it with all kinds of different type of objects. Because this is new, I need to find the project that I can show you. So let's say, I'll just drag this in. You can define things as any type of object that they have listed here. Each one has different uses. Buildings will give you basically a closed area that you can define a height to represent the buildings. Barriers would be fences or median, the little concrete blocks that they have. That's pretty much all they've got built in. City furniture is just general little 3D models, things like signs, fire hydrants, whatnot. Majority of what I work with are parcel objects, which are essentially coverage areas, and they're just closed, like I guess the representation of Civil 3D would be like a polygon object because it has a fill that you can apply to it. Let's see.
Adam, can you bring in Revit models of buildings?
You can. So in the data sources, this button right here, where you can actually add specific sources, next to it is a little pull down, shows you all the different file types that you can bring in. And an Autodesk Revit file is one of them.
Yes. Now, yeah, Adam, if you look at virtual, you're gonna see that, but you notice one of them it's like a desktop and the other one it's a cloud. So if it's a cloud one, it actually it comes from an Autodesk 360 account. Yeah, it's not like from a desktop.
So that leads me to my other question. When Infraworks first came out, it ran off of your C drive. You had to put your model on your C drive. How does it work now?
So now there's two ways to do it. You can do that way, or you can have it in the cloud. It'll basically cache a local copy for you to work in, and in the background, we'll just sync it to the cloud. I believe you need a BIM 360 account to be able to do that, because it's essentially a shared model that you and another team member could work on. I've not had to do that yet. It was one of the few things I didn't test with BIM 360 when it was free the last couple months. You'll also notice that in this model, there are these roads in here. Those were also brought in by the model builder. They're just based off of publicly available information on the center line of the road, and they're just basic Infraworks roads where they're given a style to just represent a road, and you can always change it to some other kind of road style. So like I just clicked on a boulevard section and it just changed it to look like a boulevard. It's basically how Infraworks started out, was just little styled roads. For a design road, that's a completely different thing. And for site, I don't really ever use design roads. The majority of what I do is processing the data and creating a after the fact model. Once we've designed it in Civil 3D, we just push it through Infraworks for a visual check. Something new that I've started doing though is using this for like a watershed analysis. And it's really more just so, like in our platting, we are required to do a drainage study for things with 64 acres or more upstream. And this is a really quick way, if you have a decent surface model, to check that. So to show you how to do that, on the Analyze tab, we have over here a drainage panel. And the very first option is just a watershed. It's going to prompt you something about it working in the cloud, because it's pretty process intensive. And then gives you a little options to where you can pick your watershed point. So this is your little point of interest where you want to analyze to. And then these analysis settings are how it's going to examine the surface. So it's going to, by default, it breaks the surface up into 20-meter chunks and samples in a 20-meter grid. And then the threshold is how much area contributes to it before it considers it a stream. These are, I guess, good defaults. I've left them and gotten good results. But it does take a little while if you have a large watershed you're analyzing. It's going to push it to the cloud. So if I were to hit enter right now, because it's telling me hit enter to start or can't escape to cancel. If I hit enter and I timed this earlier, it takes about 7 minutes in this case. So I'm not going to do that because I still have it in here. I just turned it off.
Yeah, and to add to it, Beton, if you notice, Beton, when you try to process it, it looks like some of the features require cloud credits.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, this one mentions that all the time, but it never really charges you a cloud credit. It's one of the few, I think, that they don't charge you anything for.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, this was a pretty quick way to find out that this is a huge floodplain potential problem for this site. This is the center line of the stream, this little blue line. Well, there's two of them actually. But I didn't even grab enough area to fully check this, but this is a pretty large area. If I were to pick this watershed, it's a pretty large area. I wish that was in acreages, because that's what we're actually caring about. That's 1,200 acres right there.
Adam, how much does this analysis differ from your Civil 3D catch basin or watersheds?
Not a whole lot. Well, this one's really simplified. It's essentially what all drains to that point that I picked. So it's doing their little analysis to see what drains to it based on the grid pattern that we gave it in the options, and it's just draping it over the surface. It doesn't really give us that much more information. It has some ability to define hydrology data, but I've not really used this in any meaningful way, because the only few times we've actually used this was on such large areas that rational doesn't work, and I don't know what regression is since I'm not an actual engineer. But it doesn't really help much on the Civil 3D side other than tell us what our areas are. We could probably export this, but I've never tried to. In this case, this actually was what told our client that this job was a waste of money and killed the project, because they were trying to plat this, and we could see right off the bat they weren't going to be able to plat anything just because of how much was in there. Ultimately, we did do like a more refined analysis, which brought these lines in a little, but they still couldn't build anything on it. So that was one of the bigger pre-development things we use this for post projects. We really use it heavily for modeling our sites. We don't do a whole lot in the middle or the design of the project, just because typically our sites are smaller and the tools available don't work as well for us yet. Like they have tools in here for creating, excuse me, parking lots. I may not have enabled those. Oh no. One project. Rob, have you used the parking layout stuff that is in Infraworks?
I have not. I usually just throw a coverage area down
Right.
with like an asphalt coverage area, and then lay out the parking in CAD using AVT, and then export that out back into Infraworks.
So yeah, I've done the same thing in the past where we've played with coverage areas to simulate a parking lot, simulate a pond, simulate the building, and just lay out stuff really quick. It was really clunky because of the way you have to layer them if you want to do any meaningful grading. Let's see. So if we were to draw a coverage area, just so that coverage area could be used for doing some early grading. Like if I were to just change this because the way this works, it now kind of tied into the terrain, and you can kind of see how it raised up the terrain that's underneath it to match. It would be a good way to visually just sit there with a client and draw stuff out. But if you're going to do more complex stuff, it gets really difficult really fast. I've done layered coverages in order to do a pond where you just draw your outer one and then you draw an inner one to represent something else, like, maybe the bottom of the pond, and it'll do the gradient between them. It works if you can get past the way it looks, because coming from Civil, 3D, AutoCAD, everything being parallel, perpendicular, makes it really hard to switch to this when you can't do that kind of thing. You want to be precise, because if you're drawing it just by clicking, you're going to go back and redraw it again in AutoCAD. And that was one of our bigger complaints. So we kind of got away from doing this kind of stuff.
Wouldn't you say though that it gives you a good starting point in some cases? Like
It does.
It gives you a good starting point for doing some more detailed, real world inside Civil 3D, after you export it.
Oh yeah, I love using it for processing the GIS data into a model we can use. Like in this case, let me go back to our data content. So this was done with Model Builder. It got me where I needed to be to start, but I stripped everything out of Model Builder and rebuilt it with the aerial imagery from TinRes, the DEM, and then our survey. And then just so we had a reference, I put our parcel in here. So we had stuff to start from. I stripped it out. Now we're using closer to real world information. And then I could jump over to Civil 3D. So if I were to close that, because you can't have your model open if you're going to bring it into Civil 3D, come over to your Insert tab, and you have this Open Infraworks model button. You'll pick your model. So we're talking about this project. And once it's read through it, you can bring everything in that's in the model, or you can actually refine your selection, pick out certain objects. The majority of the time I filter it for just that existing topo, because we want to see that end result surface, so we can do our drainage analysis against it, our design against it. And then when we've done our design in Civil 3D, we can push it back to Infraworks and it still matches it. So,
I have a couple questions, Adam. Whenever you did the drainage watershed analysis,
yes,
did you have a surface loaded in that particular model?
I did.
Okay.
It was a combination of what the model builder gave me plus the DEM that I pulled off the TinRes for that area.
Okay. And everything is in grid. Is there I assume everything's in grid. Is there an option to apply a scale factor for everything to project on the fly to?
No. So when we bring stuff into the model, it does have a scale option for the data, but I've not gotten it to work to scale anything from surface. Let me go back to this one for an example.
So like park benches, you can say like ×2, I want them looking bigger, but
Oh, in that case, yes.
but not like a scale factor from grid to surface.
Right. So when you're bringing data in, this geolocation tab is where you define that kind of information. And it has this scale section that leads me to believe we can scale it, but I don't know where it's scaling from. 'cause typically our scale factors are scaled from 0, 0. But I believe that it's scaling it from the corner of the model instead of 0, 0 when I put something in. I was testing this earlier where we have a project that is in Surface and I have data in grid and I brought them together and it just didn't scale it. But at the same time, if you're scaling a specific object like park bench, signs, you can scale them with these variables too. And I've done that to where I've put in handicap signs or whatever for my parking, and I've had to scale it or rotate it. So going back to importing that, once it's finished processing, it'll show you everything that's in that model that you can bring in. You don't really need your design roads. In this case, all I needed was my existing ground, which again is the combination of the GIS DEM file and the surveyor's topo. Click OK out and open the model. It's going to import everything I asked it to import and just bring it in with some default styles. Because I'm in a blank drawing, this surface style doesn't really, is just the standard. Let's see. So it's just, you won't really see like the seam that you would normally see in Civil 3D if you were to merge surfaces. Sometimes you'll see a jump. I think our site was right about here. So it's hard to see where that might have been. And then you can work from this as your existing condition surface. You have it far enough out, you could do your drainage analysis, whatever you need. You would go to your proposed design, work in that, and then bring that in. So I switch to my proposed design where I've done everything in Civil 3 and then just brought it into here. This is one of the other great features about the way this works is that once you have everything in here and listed out in here, you don't have to delete it and bring it back in. You can actually just reconnect to the data at any time. So if you're working on your design in Civil 3D and you changed your grading patterns or you changed your utilities and you want to update this model, all you have to do is reconnect or refresh that data. In this case, I moved everything, so I actually would have to go through and reconnect. So like, I think we made a change to this pond. We did away with that culvert. So if I reconnect to the new storm sign, make sure I'm in the right folder. And then refresh that data. It'll just remove out the culvert that we deleted. Then I'd have to redo my surface data, reconnect to that. It was not the right file. Okay. Refresh that, and then my surface will get updated as well. And then I have to go through and change out my coverages areas. So our little splitter box doesn't exist anymore. We did away with that. So we can actually just remove that. We don't need to see that anymore. So making a really quick 3D model that you can work with your client on. I think overall to build this originally took 2 hours, and that the majority of that time was in Civil 3D. Because again, these are based on what's done in Civil 3D. as closed polylines. Essentially, you would map export them out to shape files, bring them in as coverage areas, and coverage area again is just a closed polygon that you can apply material to. You can come in here and you can manually make changes to them if you'd like, but I wouldn't, unless you were like sitting there with your client wanting to make changes on the fly, and then you'd have to go back and change it in Civil 3D. Check my notes, see if I had anything else I needed to go over on that. So another thing that a lot of people like out of having this model is having an image that you can give them of it. Oops. We have the present share tab. It used to be called something else, where you can create little animations of your project. I've only done a few lately, and not with this interface, so I don't really remember how it worked. What I do the most often is create snapshots, and they're just basically images of this area of exactly what you see in the screen. I usually try and size it for like an 11 by 17, so it's good printable size. And I'll do it at like a 200 DPI. So if I were to make that something like 2200, that would give us a fairly decent image that a user or an owner could print if they really wanted to. See if I can find where I just put that. Yep. So, it works really well. I've had some clients use it for their promotional material. You can add little watermarks to your images too. So if you have an image that you want to throw in there, let's see if I have one. Let's throw that on there. So now we have a watermark that sits there, sits in the same position that you define down here. You can change its transparency so it's less transparent or more opaque, almost nearly gone. You can change where it's located, bottom left, right in the center if you want. Change the scale so it's not as large. I like putting it down here, usually with a 5% offset. And then you can just, once you've got your watermark on there, every picture you take will have it on there. It's great for putting your company logo on it, everything that goes out the door really easily. You don't have to post-process it with your marketing team or anything like that. Any questions so far?
Just to get your take on it, I know it's come a long way since it first started. That's when I had first got my hands on it and learned it. It was like the year after it came out. But does it still feel like it looks very elementary? Like the models don't have a lot of substance, that they could have easily done a lot more behind the scenes to make it quick enough for us to make it more realistic?
I feel like they could have. I don't know where they were wanting to go with it, but I know that adding in this option for a conceptual engineer view helped a little, but they still promote a workflow where we push this to 3D Studio for any heavy visualization. And I don't like that just because you lose more data integrity. Like I've had issues with my materials rotating or coming in missing or on the wrong side of the object sometimes. I've also tried to push it to other platforms like Unity or Unreal, and that's also another headache. This could have been more. I think they're focused toward transportation design shows through the way it works right now. Now I know they're wanting to do more site stuff, but I don't know how that's going to translate just yet.
Yeah. You had said that from Civil 3D, you had to export each individual type of thing into its own shape file to get your different coverage areas, right?
Yes. So I can kind of work through that real quick. I have a file that I set up for working on it.
Sounds like a pain in the ass, Adam. I do that all the time for GIS stuff, but it's a
Right.
pain in the ass. I've thought about making list routines and my own wizards and whatnot that would help me do that process faster. But with new releases almost every year, that makes sometimes that work obsolete very quickly.
Right.
I mean, you also have to look at, the way people design stuff, not most of the people are not going to design like closed polygons or closed polylines, for sidewalk.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have double lines, you're going to have that kind of stuff. So you're not going to have like a sidewalk on top of the back of curb, I mean, like the best stuff would be the double lines. So pretty much just like, sometimes like sidewalk, the edge of sidewalks, typically it's matched with the back of curb, so it's one or the other. So unless you go from the beginning of your design, it's like, okay, I want, this project always to be connected to Infraworks in any shape or form. Then you have to kind of look in creating your lines to be like close polylines. Then it's easy, like, by using layer system to export data based on layers. There are ways to do that one. And you can get, your data pretty much back and forth all the time. But I mean, like, you either have to have like, somebody, like, if you be like your own project, you might be able to do it. But, like a work environment where people will do like about like coverages and stuff. No, you're not gonna get that one. So
No.
Yeah, the quickest way I've found to make coverages is just do large areas, and then clip out inner coverages with new coverages. So, like, it used to be the common practice was if you were going to make all your pavement as one coverage, you would do like a closed polyline for the outside, a closed polyline for the inside, and then connect them with two really close together polylines that made just one closed polyline. Example would be right here, where this little bit of concrete curb has a little bit of a gap right here. What I found was just do your overall and just layer them. So this, you would bring this coverage in first, and then you would bring in your buildings on top of it. You would bring your sidewalks on top of it. You would bring your curb on top of it, your grass, landscape areas on top of that. That way it'll just null out all the concrete that it would originally show there.
In that model, can you just move those layers up and down as needed?
Yes.
yeah, so it's just a matter like kind of you have to visualize it, in a 3D, like what's on top and what's on the bottom. I mean, you do that also like if you're familiar with like Photoshop, you do that kind of stuff, the same stuff, or any software uses layer system, you kind of have to look at what's on top, what's on the bottom.
Yeah,
Right.
the draw order.
Yep. So in like this model, I did the limits of my surface was my grading limits, and I just made it grass. So anything that wasn't pavement would just show up through it. And then that was my bottom, and then I would just slap some pavement on top of it, and then I would throw my concrete curbs and other stuff on top of that. And then in this case, we have some little short loading docks. We threw that on there because that needed to be a different kind of concrete. And then because all that concrete layered on top of my landscaping, I threw in another bit of area that was that landscape. It's just layered on layered. So it made it faster to set it up. And you only really needed the line work you started with. So if you're drawing your back of curb, your gutter lines, you can just turn those all into polylines, add in a few lines that close them up, and just map export it.
I think when it's used for, when you have a specific use case for it, you know, you really want to show a client, you know, presentation type, but not spend a lot of time. I think
Right.
this does a good thing, you know, a good job of that. I don't think it's meant for high-end building rendering. You know, you're going to use something else. You're going to use other better tools that, you know, with better rendering, you know, whether it be 3D Studio, whether it be Lumia and Inkscape, whatever. But for the quick, you know, and people can get trained up on this fairly quickly, I think. You got a good designer who likes to piddle with stuff, they can learn this pretty quickly. I've struggled with it for years because it's like, it's so close to being a really good tool, but it's just not there yet. I mean, I prefer SideOps over this just because of the power that SideOps gives me, but there's stuff SideOps does that I don't like, you know, like you can't take SideOps stuff to Civil 3D very easily. You know, it's just the back and forth isn't there. And, you know, there's things that this does now better with some of the more advanced features and modeling you can do in it than SideOps does. But then there's the numbers that you can get from SideOps that are a lot better.
Jason, doesn't SideOps do parking lots really well?
It does certain types of parking lots really well, yes. You know, that again, it's all about the site. You know, when you have, you know how all this stuff works. When you've got canned presentations with a square building and a square lot, and it works great. You know, you start doing it in with lots of curves and lots of other things, and things start to fall apart. You know, it takes a little more time and it takes a little more planning, but yeah, I mean, and again, I'm not promoting one or the other. I'm just saying I want this Infraworks to be the tool. It just seems like it's like you kind of said, it's almost there, and couldn't they have done some more behind the scenes? And that's kind of how I feel about it.
And I guess just to add to that one, like, you know, like Infraworks was always built as a linear project. You know,
Yep.
It's much, it has to do with, like, you know, roads and stuff. It was not built for like site development. Of course, SideOps is more like site development. You know.
Yep. No,
So
that's exactly true. So.
now we add more stuff to the landscape, you know, to the site plan, you know, stuff by using like parking lots and stuff, you know, but it always has been for years, you know, as a linear project type of tool. So.
Adam, will you click on your parking lot or your side gravel area?
Yeah.
Okay, so what the conversion is doing as well is taking your beautiful arc and making them very small
Yes.
lines. I really dislike that conversion between GIS and CAD data that happens,
Right.
you know, through Civil 3D.
Did you?
I think that's because I opted for a shape file as opposed to an SDF file.
Yeah, and Courtney, on that one, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, like, you know, yeah, just check one of the trees in Infraworks and see like how it's built. Yeah, it's like, it's pretty much like, you know, it's like section of the trees, you know, that multiplied and then wrap around. Yeah, through the tree.
So if you choose an SDF file for your export, you'll get that seamless geometry.
Believe so.
And yeah, and SDF file, you know, also stores like all type of, you know, like GIS based, you know, features. So pretty much in an SDF file, you can, you know, you can add to one SDF file, you can add points, lines, polygons, only in one single file versus shape file. It's, but of course, SDF is not S3 compatible. So
Yes, that tends to be my problem as well.
yeah, let's turn around and see like how they're built. Like, you know, like it's like more.
They're basically like little sections. an
Yeah,
image this
intersections.
direction, image that one.
It's like lots of PNGs wrapped around the tree. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So sometimes with those trees, you are better off, to bring a 3D model from somewhere versus that tree.
And then when you throw shadows on it, it makes it look a little better.
Yeah, but because of it, so one of the biggest issues, when you take the Infraworks model to 3ds Max, is the complexity of those trees. People they just them, but don't use them.
Yeah, if you're gonna take it to 3D Studio, you might as well just export a straight stick and have that just swapped out in the process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But for throwing stuff in there really quick, this actually works out really well because all I did was draw a line.
So maybe if you're gonna be some corny, might be where I guess I don't know if you're familiar with S3's CD engine, but I mean it's kind of the same stuff, but looks like now CD engine they go a little bit further now. They do collaboration with Unreal and stuff. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Do you play by chance with the Bentleys like Luminarty and stuff?
I have not had the opportunity.
Yeah, okay. So I mean which is it's Luminarty and then is the open concept station or concept station, I forgot what's called. Because another people they complain about is about realism, adding 3D models, dynamic ones, cars driving, that kind of stuff. I'm like, yes, you can do that in 3ds Max, but sometimes people, I guess if you want to add realism, another one, but people complain is about the buildings.
Here's another one that we could talk about too if we wanted to go into real visualization. Let me kill that sound though. So this is Unreal's twin motion, where each of those trees is a real 3D model that has interactions with the environment, with real physics for wind and all that stuff.
But why would you choose this one versus Lumion?
It's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, Lumion does, amazing. Yes.
This uses the computer different, so it uses the hardware different. And Lumion, you need a lot of power to get good results.
This actually runs pretty well on my crappy desktop at home, although
Yeah.
graphics aren't nearly as good as this.
Oh yeah, there's and that's just a function of your GPU, but
Yeah.
but the way it uses the computer is a little different, and so you run into issues. Lumion is great, but the truth is Lumion's on the way out, because this is what most everyone's moving towards is the Unreal Engine, and a lot of the newer rendering programs have been rewritten, and they use the hardware different, and they use the way they do the frames and all that. So and don't get me wrong, again, I'm not promoting one or the other. I love Lumion, it does some amazing things, but this actually does even more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I sat in on 3 separate presentations for this alone at AU just because I fell in love with it.
Yeah,
I just couldn't find a use for it.
Yeah, I don't think this one requires as much hardware, whereas really to get good results with Lumion, you need a really hefty video card. You need that GPU that really is works with the way the program was written. So
I think this is built on the Unreal Engine, so it uses all the same stuff behind the scenes, and it's, while you're designing, it's actively living, so the wind is blowing while you're still laying stuff out, so you can see how things interact as you place them. You can change the weather patterns, the lighting, all at the same time, and just see how it's affected. Probably a bigger sell for architects than it is for most civil at the moment. But it is an amazing technology. I'm not gonna lie about that. I didn't really have a whole lot much more to say on Infraworks.
Do y'all remember Impression?
I do. I still have the installer of 3.0. If only it would actually work.
Yeah, I have it, but it's not working at all anymore with Windows 10.
Yeah.
Oh
I
man.
need to go back to like a Windows.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I like have to dig out an old desktop in order to use it. I loved it.
Yeah. I was
We-
disappointed when they
Land
killed it.
planner.
Oops.
Yeah, we still get files from land planners that are using it.
Yeah, it was nice.
Just as an aside, in using Infraworks, I know I did a lot of stuff when I was in school learning how to use it. And one of the things that I found that was really helpful if you're just trying to do some sort of visualization would be to go to the 3D model warehouses and grab models that are already there and convert them in whatever the native package was and then pull it into Infraworks. I don't have an example of that handy, but I know that it worked very well in terms of getting models in that had more character than these square boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of free stuff out there that you can grab. That's a good point, Lynn. There's lots of stuff you can go out and grab and bring in. And if you're in a city, if you're doing anything, we used it for some downtown stuff in a particular city, and we were actually able to go get. I think it was from the SketchUp spot where you can get SketchUp models.
Right, SketchUp is really good.
Yeah, we were able to get most of the surrounding area in this downtown location already built for us and bring it in, and it gives you a lot of good content. And again, I think back to the point, that I brought up earlier and Adam kind of talked about is, use the tool for what it does well. It's good for quick, higher end presentation. Well, not higher end, a more visual presentation for a lot of clients. They respond to this more than they do a flat 2D piece of paper with.
That's for those that can't visualize.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, your clients that are one-offs or haven't been in development very long, they're basically the target. If you're talking to a contractor that's been doing this for 20, 30 years, he's still going to want to see a set of plans because he doesn't see the value in this, even though everyone else does.
Yeah, I found it especially useful when you're in the conceptual stage, just trying to get funding for things.
Yes.
Yeah, it's helped a lot on several of our projects. I have one that I tried to open up earlier. I guess I broke the model. It has like a 15-foot wall, 15-foot retaining wall across the front of the property, and the owner just couldn't understand what that looked like until we made that model and sent it to him. And you don't even have to send them this model. You can use the Autodesk shared views and just send them a web view of it. It will basically take this entire model, stick it into a web browser that they can then just pan and zoom around. And you can assign property data to it if you want. But if you're just going to send it to them to look at, then you can do that. Like I've got these two that we sent. This is the one I was actually trying to open a little while ago.
I think it's all still really good stuff, and it's good to use when you have to pull something out that you've never needed to use before.
Right. This particular project actually has a Revit model in it. So our architect farmed out his Revit modeling to another guy, and he sent me the model. But because of that, it does take a little time to load because his model has everything in it, like furniture, features. There's even a car too inside the building, because this is a car dealership. But it doesn't have a roof, oddly.
That's one of the things I found pulling in the other ones too. And occasionally you get a model that would just not render right.
Yeah. And then once you get used to the zoom and pan of Infraworks, this goes the complete opposite. So you have to then get used to that. But having this visual right there really helped the client figure out, oh, okay, that's a pretty big wall. That's going to be an expense. We need to figure that out.
I've got to jump off, everyone. I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, have a good one. Okay. Yeah, and that brings us to the end of the hour. So if you have any other Infraworks questions or stuff you want to talk about, now's time.
Now, I haven't used the software. Have you tried, supposedly you're able to do a roadway in Infraworks and import it, and it generates the corridor in Civil 3D. Has anybody tried that part and with any success?
I've not tried it. I know that is doable. You can, let me open a crap model before I do that. Do this one.
You know, I always got to ask, because you see all these fancy, demonstrations from Autodesk themselves, and it's like, will it actually work that way?
Right. So this was when I was testing building from scratch without model builder. So no aerial. Component road. I guess we'll stick with that. We can just, guess that's the road there. Just lay it out. Okay. So yeah, you would lay out your road. You can edit the profile if you want using a profile viewer, or you can, if you can get it to pick off of it. So this is one of the other things that I've been struggling with, is the way they've set up the pick. You have to pick just the right place to get to what you want. I don't know where I'm picking. Okay, that'll maybe help. There we go. Well, now I can't see my profile. Okay. We'll just call that. Okay. So if I close this, go back in to a blank drawing and open map model. And if I could remember where that model was. Oh. I think it was here. No. So just a side note, I've had problems with Infraworks saving to my servers, so I've been putting things locally and it hasn't been the same place every time I create one. So I can never remember where I saved them. Okay.
When you bring in data, does it live in the drawing, or is it referencing back to that data still? So if you like bring in a GIS shapefile, is that data now living inside your Infraworks model, or is it still referencing back to your GIS data?
It is referencing back. So it'll be.
It's linked, so what happens in the background, pretty much, the data is imported, the data is generated. By the anytime you can refresh the connection, and the data should be updated based on the connection, yeah.
Okay.
So it's not like a live connection in the sense, like, if I update the shapefile, it's not gonna tell me like, hey, you got the new update, of the shapefile. You still have to go and say refresh. Yeah.
Right. It does this whole thing where it'll create your actual model file is this, but your folder has everything in it, like all this stuff, and it basically creates a temporary image or tile or data of it. So it's kind of static, but it knows where the original is. So when you reload it, it'll go pull it. It just won't pull it every time.
Okay.
It just basically keeps it kind of fast, so it only loads what it loaded last time. And this selection box is always really slow. You could set up an XML file that basically preloads what you want for a project. It comes with 2 or 3 already made where it's everything like by default, or planning roads or surfaces, I think are the other 2 options. The joys of live testing stuff. Oh, I see you're back in the office, Ish.
Yeah. I'm getting ready to do stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at the like for the because like since we talk about Infraworks models, pretty much on the Infraworks models, I was part of the Smart City Challenge with the City of Austin. And for that time, we had to, submit the Infraworks model. Pretty much it was to create the video of the whole stuff, and we had the Infraworks model of the whole city. So, but that time is like pretty much, low quality for, the whole city, and then high quality for the places where we want to kind of point the people to, So yeah, imagine it on like a 10 gigabyte project. Yeah, pretty nice.
So there you go. You have your alignment, basically what I drew in Infraworks. You have your corridor model. You have your assembly and sub-assemblies, and it even created a surface from that corridor model.
Nice. I can see that being useful.
And I guess the surfaces, the surfaces, I guess it's what it's catch, not what's called. It's a snapshot, no?
Looks like, yeah, looks like, yeah, it's not actually connected to the corridor.
It's
So it's just
a snapshot. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could go into your corridor and probably build a cleaner surface, but it didn't give me those options. Like, this is a very lean corridor properties. Oh wait, I clicked the wrong thing. That's why.
No, but I guess both the existing and proposed surfaces, but both, snapshots.
Yep.
So yeah.
Adam, do you have to start with adding your baseline before you can add a top for your surface, I think?
If we were to rebuild a surface from this corridor, probably not. It has a baseline in here already. So it's using that assembly that was down there. So we probably could just create one. Let's see, just say that. Yeah. And yeah, that's the first time I've actually done that process. I heard or read somewhere that we can modify the corridor in this and then push it back to Infraworks and have some kind of live back and forth. But something to point out too is that when it processes this stuff, it's writing an IMX file between the two. So it's not a direct translation. There's a intermediary file type that it's creating for that.
That is true. I think in the latest Infraworks, you can actually export as IMX and even a DWG for that matter. You can actually take it there, and anything changes in Civil 3D site, you can refresh it and update it.
Cool. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Right. Any other questions? Nope. All right, cool.
What's the next meeting about?
Next meeting. Let's see. GIS of some kind. Who wants to do that? Jason said he was going to talk to somebody, but I haven't heard back about it yet.
I'm trying to figure out if I should take it. I already have an idea for like, GIS, like, drone to map and stuff, but yeah. Like get your data from, photogrammetry and stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going to involve like, more or less like, like drone to map, we're going to involve like S3 processing, LiDAR. I don't know. So I guess, I know you can do stuff also like in recap and you can do stuff, but, thinking after, after attending the S3 user conference, it showed like, how they do the stuff, like, processing the LiDAR, how you can classify ground and all that stuff. Yes, it's a manual stuff, but it's a nice way to get stuff, from the, and then you can get like, the building footprints and you can linearize them, take away the zigzags from rasters. It's nice.
And there are some latest additions, what we call connector for ArcGIS and Infraworks. You can actually bring in the feature layers and raster layers from ArcGIS Online or portal directly into Infraworks, and it's a two-way communication. You can save it back and refresh all those things.
Cool.
So unless somebody is like a GIS specific, nice. Unless somebody is a GIS specific, let's say workflow or like what you want to see on GIS part, versus, like, hey, how you guys do this or that kind of stuff. So.
I would love to volunteer, but I'm not on cutting edge at all. We're using 2019 and ArcMap 10.6. We have Pro, and of course 2019 is not compatible with our ArcMap versions. And so basically, if I were to actually present information, I could see it be more, where do I gather my base data from? Like, where are my data sources? How do I do my roundabout process when I don't have the latest and greatest? So
yeah,
I can.
Well, I don't have the latest either. This is what I use for GIS.
Courtney, if I remember that one, I guess 2019 is compatible, or 2018 format is compatible with ArcGIS Pro.
But repeat that. What format are we using
But
for
the
Pro?
2018 format, the DWG format is compatible with ArcGIS Pro. Yeah, it might not be work with ArcMap or my work with the 10.6, but I don't know for sure.
So the problem is most of our users don't have access to Pro. We only have, I don't know, a handful of users that have access to Pro.
Yeah, but it looks like actually we're gonna deprecate ArcMap, I guess, in the next year or so. So
yeah,
you're gonna be forced to go to Pro, and
yeah,
you're gonna learn how to use the ribbon.
Or you can use this. This is free. You don't have to pay for this.
I know, Adam. I know.
Have you used Grass as well, Adam?
I have it installed. I honestly don't use it for that much. Processing some data and converting it is most of what I do. I think I've made 2 maps with it so far.
And what about Global Mapper? Is anybody using that?
I do. I have it. I do.
Ishka's got it all.
Yes, and so pretty much, when I have both the light, the Global Mapper, and then I'm also the LiDAR module. So what I'm gonna try to do later on and figure out, like, pretty much that's my plan for the next, week or so. I'm planning to, to use my DJI Phantom 4 RTK to fly a site and see what I can get from the point cloud. Yes, I know I can get classified point data, but I'm trying to, classify, use multiple versions of software or stuff to see what I can get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
whether or not Pix4D, drone to map, what's better?
I mean, Pix4D, I know is the kind of the gold standard on Wetline, but I'm saying, like, drone to map uses the same technology as a light version. It's just a matter of, I'm trying to see, like, what I can get from a point cloud, from the, for geophotogrammetry and see it. And it'd be maybe like, I'm gonna find like this, like, Adam has somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like, 3 buildings, 4 buildings, stuff on top of it, stuff, get the data and see what I can get from Wetline, so. It would be like, yeah, it would be just, to use drone to map, I could just try to see, like, use, to use ARC, what's called recap and see, like, what I can get from the data, pretty much, compare the two of them if you kind of stuff. But, yeah, so, I mean, some of them are suited better for us. Of course, I would say, like, Pix4D, I would go that way, but I don't have a Pix4D license. So what I'm going to say, like, so pretty much, for me, it's more like, what happens if you get the non-classified LS file? Pretty much, because there's the issue, like lots of people that don't have a classified LS file. If you don't get the non-classified LS file, what you do with it? Let's say if you have, like, you can use drone to map, to get photogrammetry. Maybe you can use the global map or see how it classifies it if it does a good job, or you can use RGS Pro and classify it and see if you do a good job with it on too. So should I take the August?